stop, steroid use is steroid abuse. It's not possible to use a hard drug safely or just like on the side. It's like if I told you, yeah, I'm doing meth, but like I'm not abusing meth, there's a difference. No, there's no fucking difference.
30, 40 years ago, you would never imagine that a health center would give out, sterile needles to an IV drug user, right? They say you're encouraging these people to use, but I trained up in Seattle for medical school, and that obviously is a big center where there is a lot of issues with IV drug use, and we're trying to take compassionate care of patients. And I know in that region and other cities with that issue, they had needle exchange programs, right? Or they did things like Narcan prophylactically for harm reduction. No one's giving a blessing, but we're saying that there are these activities going on. We want to help protect these patients until they're able to quit doing the unsafe activity. Let's take smoking cessation. If a patient is using cigarettes in a specific quantity, they have recommendations to do a low dose CT to screen for lung cancer. Now, to that same argument, if they don't have a lung nodule and their CT is clean, it's not that we're saying, oh, well, everything's fine. We still continue to help and assist with support resources for cessation, but we want to catch something before it becomes catastrophic, right? Same thing applies with issues like accelerated atherosclerosis and early atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in these men. That's why things like the coronary calcium, screening the lipids, seeing if they have additional family risk factors for dyslipidemia that'll make them prone to early stroke and heart attack.
There's a reason why we stigmatize drug use. I know that it's now become a meme to say that we need to normalize certain things and we need to stigmatize certain things. It's opening the eyes of a lot of people on the cultural protection that we have surrounded certain topics with. Certain things are taboo for a reason. It's because they're bad. And they're not just bad because, the religion has said it's bad or society says it's bad. No, it's bad because drugs are bad for your health. So society as a whole has decided to stigmatize drug use so as to prevent young people and people who don't think with their brain to actually jump on the boat. When you give a clear no and you say no, PD use is bad across the board, and you don't open up the possibility of them being acceptable, people don't negotiate with it. But if you say, just train 5 years, well, why wouldn't it be just 4 years? And then just 3 years, and then 2, and then 1? Who are you to say it's 5 years? That's why it needs to be never take PEDs. Because if you don't, you're going to have teens who are going to, again, try to see where the boundaries are, and they're going to keep pushing them. Because even if you wait 5 years, drug use is still drug use. You're still going to damage your health. So I've never understood why people say that as if it's okay to cash in your natty card if you kept it long enough. In my opinion, it is absolutely unacceptable because PD use damages your health. That is the truth across the board, regardless of your age. And you need also to take into consideration that people who are going to be receptive to that type of discourse are already weak enough in the head to fall for PEDs. There are already people who are susceptible to drug use. So if you give them a chance, guess what they're going to do? They're going to take drugs. They're not going to wait. And if you tell me, well, these people are stupid. Yes, they are. Most lifters are stupid because most lifters are children. They're novices. They're 17-year-olds. They don't know any better. So when we address them and we talk about PED use, we need to be strict. You need to set rules and you need to explain why the rules matter. If you just remove the rules, you cannot be surprised if more and more people start taking drugs. It's just natural. Most of the time, the people who take PEDs that are lumped all together in the same category as bad are put in that bag because they give shit advice, they are sellouts, and they have no integrity whatsoever. You cannot expect people to not then generalize and create stereotypes in their heads. We notice patterns, and we have noticed that this platform has been turned to shit by people who take drugs. So even if they're not bad people and we're not better than them, we are still able to say objectively that their advice and their influence in the fitness sphere has been damaging. Every time I see one of you in my comments saying, oh, don't say that about drugs. I wanted to do drugs when I was older. I want to chuck tomatoes at your face, like virtually through the screen, because that's what you need. You need to be placed in a public space and shackled, and people need to throw tomatoes at you until you stop being stupid. Reality is what you need. It's what would actually make your life better, because you are in reality begging for someone to talk you out of it. I've seen that. It's not just with PED use. Every single time someone has to advertise what they want to do in the future like this, in a weird, desperate manner, it's always because they are hoping that someone can break them out of it. Again, if you come on this channel, which is called literally natural hypertrophy, and you complain that I'm slandering PED users, yeah, that's what I'm doing, because they deserve to be slandered. You can't slander drug use. It's like if I was on the streets and I saw some guy laying in his own puke, having an OD on heroin. I was like, oh, he's in a rough shape right there. And you're like, oh, don't say that about him. Like, don't judge him. You're slandering that poor man. He's slandering himself. He's dying right now. What I'm doing doesn't even constitute 1/10, 1/100th of the damage he's done to himself. And if no one is there to slander these people, then they can just run free and just massively spread propaganda, lie about the situation, and no one is there to challenge them. I'm not going to stand there and do that. If you do something stupid for yourself, it's my duty as someone who sadly is a little bit too kind to show you that what you're doing is just going to kill you. It's going to kill you. Saying that PED users are killing themselves is not slander, it's the truth. You can't slander if it's the truth, and I have proof to back it up, but I'm going to get to that now. You hear PED users complain about naturals, saying, oh, again, you're being condescending because I do drugs, do you think you're better than me? Which is a really passive and pathetic type of talk, by the way. You're pretty much begging someone to see them as your equal, which makes no sense, because at the same time, these PED guys love to say, oh, you're jealous, bro? Yeah, I'm really jealous of your heart attack you're going to get in 25 years, bro. But on top of that, the very atmosphere surrounding these people has changed, because we have now a platform where apparently the meanies, the bad guys, are guys like me who preach the natural way, where I have people coming up on my comments and saying, oh, you shouldn't say that, and you're being judgmental and all of that stuff. Like, oh, who do you think you are to set the standards of what is right and what is wrong? Well, unless you're telling me that using hard drugs is suddenly right, in which case you should already exit the video and just, I don't know, try to rethink your life and your values, then you also understand that I'm in the right by default. By being anti-drugs, I am in the right. I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but that level of moral relativism, again, is really dangerous. Because if you can justify the use of drugs by saying that people who talk about it and try to talk against it, speak up against it, are the bad guys, then you're making drug use into a good thing, and drug users into good people. So what type of world are you trying to create? For you, for your children, for just everyone? Is that a world you want to live in? I personally don't think so, and this is why I can say proudly that yes, I do believe that the natural way is the best way, because again, we are normal. And only on YouTube Fitness would it be normal for a guy who literally uses syringes to inject substances in their body to be able to talk down on to other people and saying, oh, don't judge me. No, I'll judge you. You know why? Because I know for a fact that you've stopped judging yourself. And that's the reason why you're going to go down a very dangerous path. You need to get back your brain and your cerebral capacities, because right now they're gone, they're on vacation. There's nothing inherently better about natural lifters in terms of nature. What makes us superior is our choices. Listen to that and understand it. It means that inherently, who we are as naturals, as a creature, is not better. But the choices we make are better because they're based on logic, and therefore, as a person, it leads to a better life. That to me is what a better person is. All of that nonsense about being more moral, etc., I've never cared about that, and none of my arguments were based on that. What I cared about is living a long life, living a happy life, being able to be very proud of your gains, etc., etc. Shame is something that comes from the self. I do not possess the ability to shame you. Philosophically, this has been researched and demonstrated perfectly well. You project the way others think and feel about you, which creates the shame. So when you tell me, well, stop shaming PED users, I can't. I do not have that power, again. And that is something that was demonstrated by the people in my comments who complained and said, well, you're shaming me right now. What is wrong with these people? Well, it's very simple to understand. These people have a voice inside themselves which knows that what they're doing is incorrect and is going to be very damaging in the long run, but they're silencing that voice as much as possible. I come along and I just say, well, PED use is damaging for your health. You're not going to keep the gains. You're going to eventually have problems down the line. And that tiny voice in them awakes. And they don't like that because it's shame. That's the voice of shame that I awake. And then instead of looking at themselves, they look at me and they say, hey, shut up. You're making me feel bad. I'm not making you feel bad. You're making yourself feel bad. An actual PED user who is very confident about himself would take one look at my video and say, I don't care. And I know they exist, but you are not one of them because you felt the need to go out and complain about the shaming portion of it and a large portion of PED users as well. So that demonstrates it right there. Yes, I am superior to you. Why? Because of your own actions. You are essentially forcing me through shame, which is paradoxical, to stop shaming you because it's the only recourse you have. You don't have the recourse of factual statements or logical proofs. If you did, you would have used that already, but you haven't.
Steroids are the X factor because once you introduce them into the equation, they replace everything. And by that I mean that they are so potent, they are so capable of building mass that they are going to by default take the reins. They're going to become the most important thing in your life and in your regimen. Why? Because if you think about it logically, you prioritize in your training the things that give you the most gains. And since your steroid regimen is what is going to give you the most gains, if you're smart about it, you are going to make it your priority. But by being smart about it, you are going to become stupid because tiny bit by tiny bit, you're going to ignore the other facets of training until the only thing that is left is steroids. This is what I mean by X factor. It's also a big reason why I personally will never do steroids is because I already see the time and efforts I put into my programs, I put into actually training, I put into keeping up with my diet, etc., my recovery, all of that. And I'm thinking to myself, man, is there any space for me to add steroids? And the answer is no, which means that for me to add that X factor, I would need to make space and I would need to push away the rest. This is why you have guys who look amazing, who have amazing physiques, who know nothing about programming, even though programming is the key to a good-looking physique. When you look at someone who's going to take a dive from a very high point into a swimming pool, and they sort of like do this back and forth to hype themselves up, this was exactly me. The more of these videos I consumed, the more these guys told me, oh, the side effects are not that important, look at the benefits, the more I was getting enthralled by the idea of PED use. And every single young man who has taken PEDs knows that there is always a time period where you romanticize the use, and this is what allows you to make that decision, a decision that you know is not logical, that you know is dangerous. So it was at that point that I decided to order PEDs.
Anyone who shares our values and regrets their drug use is welcome. That is the principle of redemption that, by the way, most healthy ideologies espouse. We are humans, we're going to make mistakes. If we were to eliminate every single person that made a mistake, most of you guys would die on the spot. I would die 15 times on the spot. I have sinned times and times again, but I was allowed back in. I was given a chance. As long as there is a willingness to repent, there is the choice for redemption. And that is something that I want to say to every single person that took drugs, feels bad about themselves, and wonders, can I be a noble natty? Can I actually embrace a virtuous lifestyle? The answer is yes, but only if you make that choice. And anyone who tells you otherwise, anyone who's going to turn their back and spout about the superiority of noble natties and how much more morally inclined we are, all of that is nonsense, because at the end of the day, morality is practical. A morality is applied to allow the most amount of people to live a healthy and virtuous life. So a morality that is exclusionist is one that is simply not going to work here. It's one that we cannot embrace if we don't want to become a cult, because that's how cults are also created.